Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm George Binns, and I'm here with my co-host, Elliot Margolis. And this evening we have as our guest Kathleen Feldman, candidate for Ward 5 City Council. So the obvious question is, why are you running?
That's a great question. Thank you so much for having me on the air, George and Elliot. I'm running because I have fresh ideas and energy that I would love to bring to the City Council and to get to work for Beverly. I have a 6 and an 8-year-old son. They both go to North Beverly Elementary School. And we live in North Beverly, and I love the community. I'm deeply involved. And because of that, I've come up with a lot of small but practical ideas over the last few years that I think would make our city even better. And I would like to apply my professional skills as an operations manager and working on balancing a budget to bring those to work for Beverly to be a strong advocate for the constituents of Ward 5.
So what are these new different ideas that you want to implement?
So, I have a few core principles that I think we need to work on, core factors that I think Beverly needs to invest in for the best return on investment for the city. And for that long-term budget health. And I think those are traffic and pedestrian safety, education excellence, and environmental sustainability. So it's kind of the infrastructure pieces that need to be built up for us to be able to get a good return on investment. And some of those ideas are as simple as, I know a very specific corner that we really need to put a no right on red on at, because it's making it hard for people on the commuter rail to safely cross 1A. And then it's other things like...
Okay, what corner is that one?
So the corner...
I'm on the Parking and Traffic Commission, so I'd like to know...
So the corner at the North Beverly commuter rail station, when you're coming up from Dodge's Row onto 1A, and you would make a right if you're facing where the old Mathnasium was, the mattress firm.
Basically, on my way to Starbucks.
Okay.
Yeah, you're making a right. You're going to Starbucks. You just dropped your kids off at North Beverly Elementary. You look left to see that no one's coming, and then you make that right on red. But that's the only crosswalk on 1A for any kid or family to get from the other side of 1A, which is a big part of North Beverly, to this elementary school. And the commuters. So when I had a stroller and I would go to the playground, which was the only playground for our neighborhood, it was on the other side of 1A, I'd actually have to push my buggy out into the road before I just this morning I had to go, stop, I'm here, even if you have the light, because people just aren't paying attention to pedestrians. And I think that because of that, I moved to North Beverly. And I wanted our home because it was in walking distance to the commuter rail, the school, a Starbucks, a grocery store, and the lake and the woods. And I really like being able to get around without a car. I don't like getting in a car. And when I see little obstacles here and there that make that harder for me as an able-bodied, youngish person, I can only think that our seniors or anyone with mobility issues or children, that it's got to be even more problematic for them. So that's one small practical solution. Mm-hmm. But I have a whole bunch of others. I could go on and on and on. I want a shuttle that goes like a jitney or something from both North Beverly or Montserrat commuter rail stations to downtown Beverly, because now I feel like I'm on an island sometime because it's so hard to get downtown in a car. But there's no trains that run consistently. So as a person that likes biking or walking or running, I can't safely get downtown without getting in my car. And so I'd like to look into solutions that might be bigger or outside the box, but I'm willing to consider them because I have a lot of motivation to get this done.
Okay, so how long have you lived in Beverly?
So I have lived in North Beverly for 8 years.
Okay. In those 8 years with your ideas, have you ever gone to the city council and asked and suggested these ideas to them?
So I've written about green space. I did write to our current city councilor about possibly pushing the fence back at the water authority, because there's a fence and the kids all sled on the hill, but the majority of it is fenced off, and I didn't really receive any I got kind of a no, but not really a good reason why. I'm kind of a but why type person. And some of my other ideas, I've brought up. I did go to a traffic commission meeting because I'm worried about the bike lanes because they're only 8 inches across at some parts, and it seems like some of the bike lanes have been implemented in a way that somebody just had white paint on the side of the road and good intentions. I'm not saying they did not have good intentions, but I think Beverly isn't a very bike-friendly city. So even if you're in the bike lanes, people aren't accustomed to sharing the road. So I've had concerns. I brought that to the Bikes Committee. And so I've tried a little bit here and there, but some of these ideas I've realized until somebody like myself that is in this community every day, walking, biking, running. I work at the Wenham Museum. I bring my kids to school. Until that person has maybe a seat at the table, we might not be willing to try some of those things and actually seriously consider them. So I'm trying to get that voice at the table of the person that is trying to get their kids around safely. On a mother's motivation to get her small children around safely, there's no greater force on earth than a motivated mother trying to get something done.
I would know, not being a mother, but
I know
Have you dealt with a mother?
Not the full of the mother bear. I just know that much.
Yeah.
Anyway, you've been out knocking on doors.
Mm-hmm. Every day.
What's the message you've been getting from the people?
So it's funny because I started in April when I pulled my papers, and I knew that I wanted to run because of traffic and pedestrian safety, excellence in education, and environmental sustainability. And the message could not be clearer that that is what traffic and pedestrian safety is the number one issue when I knock on doors. And it's in conjunction with a bigger problem, not problem, but something that we really need to consider, in that everyone's major concern is the development downtown. So I know we're in Ward 5, but it just goes to show that, a vote on city council, we're one Beverly, and I'm one vote that will affect the lives of people, all over the city. And so the major issue that people are having is that we are continuing to have all this development, but we haven't brought the infrastructure up to keep pace with all that development. And that is the number one concern tied into. So it matches that people are concerned about the traffic and the parking and the schools not having enough. I mean, my younger son is in first grade, and his class is a bubble year, but so is the kindergarten class. And I don't know when we're going to start saying that this is just the size of what we're bringing in. These are not just anomalies. If we have multiple bubble years in a row, we just have a lot more people. And so I think everyone's concerned that Beverly is changing in a way that they're not anti-development, but they really want to make sure that we keep the charm of the city that they move to and that they love. And I'm one of those people. I'm doing this because I am one of those people that cares about those issues deeply.
So what I'm hearing is that you think Beverly has done a lousy job planning the future of the city. Because what I'm hearing is all these new apartments coming in, there's going to be kids in them, all the new construction, there's going to be kids there, all the new businesses, there's going to be more traffic. So you're saying that the planning was not good, and
I didn't say lousy. I didn't say it wasn't good. I just think
that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm wondering how you solved that problem. I mean, Beverly's an old city. We're not in the Midwest where they have wide roads.
Exactly.
So how do you solve these problems?
So I don't think that Beverly has done a lousy job in planning. I definitely don't think that. I think that we're at a turning point, though. I think that's what I'm looking at, and that's why I'm running, because we've reached a point where I think, Rantoul, some of the developments on Rantoul, my husband's a Beverly native, and he was like, it's much better than it was. Rantoul needed a lot of these revitalizations, and I'm not anti-development at all. But I think we're at that turning point where we need to look at maybe putting a pin in that and thinking of what's next. Because if we're creating this tax base downtown with new people coming in theory, people without children to start, young professionals, what are we doing to retain that tax base? What are we doing to make Beverly the type of place that you want to stay and raise your family in? Are we doing that by being in the minority and not having free full day kindergarten? I mean, if I was a young family moving here and I bought a condo, I don't know what would I want to do the things that would keep me in Beverly, to buy those single family homes and to stay here and make the community stronger and not become another bedroom community. So I think it's a turning point. Not lousy planning. I didn't say that. But I think that we really are at a critical point where we need to think about the future and what we see for the future.
Well, you're into one of my favorite subjects of housing, and I differentiate between affordable housing, which meets the codes, and housing that people can afford. And you're raising the issue of, all right, you're a relatively high-priced employee in some Boston firm, and you can't afford to live in Boston, so you move to the suburbs, and we're into this game of transient-oriented development. And Mayor Scanlon started it years ago with, we got 5 railroad stations, and we want to cluster people around the stations, which means at least high-rises, garden apartments, and maybe high-rises. North Beverly's got a station. What's the feeling of the natives around that area about having that converted into a transient-oriented development?
So we already have 2 apartment-style complexes within walking distance of the North Beverly commuter rail station. And I think the big concern for the community, the single-family homeowners in there, and I have knocked at a lot of apartment doors too, but it's a little harder. You look a little bit weirder if you're buzzing up to people's apartments. I think the big thing is that right now, the way the Commodore Plaza and everything on 1A is configured is not functional. So the idea of putting housing in that area without scrapping the whole plaza and kind of reconfiguring it doesn't really make sense right now. I don't think we need to add more high-rise type apartments in that area until we've kind of reconfigured. It's unsafe right now. There's at least 6 entrances and exits along the plaza, and they're not connected. So you have to go, if you're going to grab a cup of coffee, you go into the Starbucks plaza, and then if you have to run and get something at Stop and Shop, you got to come out and go into Stop and Shop, and then there's this Dunkin' Donuts drive-through, and it's just, it's insanity and near misses every morning. So the idea of putting housing in there too without reconfiguring the whole plaza, I'm not against it long term. It's just it can't be built upon what already exists because we don't have the setup ready to do that. So,
All right. You familiar with tax classification?
Tax classification, kind of.
Okay. Basically, you have a tax rate of X number of dollars in the city. And the city council has a right to take that tax rate and increase it for commercial property, which decreases residential property taxes. Okay? Now, Beverly, I believe, gets 175% of the tax rate for commercial.
Okay.
Okay? But obviously, you can only get so many dollars into the city compared to the previous year. So the businesses get hit pretty hard. And yet the businesses don't get all the services that the city provides. Rubbish removal is one example. They don't send kids to school is another example. So the question is, how do you feel about the fact that we're taking the businesses and charging them 75% extra just to exist in the city of Beverly, when actually the more commercial property you have, the lower the tax rate could be?
Well, I think that we need to look at it in terms of balance. And I think this is definitely a case-by-case basis because it depends on what the business is and what type of jobs they would be bringing to Beverly. Because beyond taxes and bringing in their money, it has to be a fit, that they're a good neighbor and that they fit what we are looking for to invest in the city. So, I mean, I think that in terms of bringing new businesses in and charging them, I think that we have a great community where people want to stay and not leave the city to buy their items and, you know, go shopping and get things done. So they don't want to go to Danvers. I don't want to go to Danvers to go run my errands. So they would have a good customer base if they came to Beverly. So because of that, I think that it would be fair if they could see the feasibility to charge them the taxes for it.
And you get into one of my favorite subjects of corporations do not pay taxes. They just collect them for the government.
Right.
So anytime that you raise the taxes, you're forcing the company to raise the prices.
Which means the consumer pays more.
Yeah, so the consumer's paying all the taxes all the way through. But we get back to the issue, I think, of you talked a second ago about people wanting to stay here. I start with the people that are working at Starbucks. Can you afford to live in Beverly if you're only working at Starbucks?
Probably not right now. I mean,
So
not if you plan
we
on.
get into this issue that maybe it's not exactly a Ward 5 concern, but citywide, we want to have a vibrant community downtown.
Of course, yeah.
And that implies service industries, which are not the highest priced jobs. And right now, we're in the middle, we, the city, are in the middle of the grand plan for how the future is going to be. And it's a lot of talk about, yeah, we need these condos and apartments to raise the taxes. But at the same time, I don't hear an awful lot of words about afforded housing that people can afford at all these different levels. So where in Ward 5 or where in the city do you think that this is a viable alternative?
I think there's a lot. I've been to these master planning meetings, the one with the map and the
Yeah,
dots.
that's the one we met at, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I went to the Ward 5 one where we put the map out and they showed all the space that was actually city space that could be used, city land that could be used for development. And, you know, I think there are a lot of places near commuter rail stations that have the opportunity to have some more housing put in around them. Whether that community is open to it or not, that would be the question. Because there's we have 5 commuter rail stops in Beverly, and it's very built up already around Montserrat and downtown Beverly and North Beverly to some extent. But we have Pride's Crossing and the farms too, and there's a lot of open land over there. And we need to look at affordable housing in a way that's not just members of the service sector, because that is, of course, the dream is to live and work in Beverly. I mean, that is really just what we should be able to do as a community, and we should have housing available at all levels. But we're also increasingly seeing, and my neighbor is a perfect example, we're seeing people that are older. My neighbor is in her 70s, and she's a widow, and she's got this beautiful 5-bedroom home that she would love to downsize, but she's not going to pay for a condo, a luxury condo downtown. But that would be ideal housing for her, as a condo. So I really think that we need to look into the housing that we're building. Maybe it's not necessarily in the wrong places, but we need to look at having affordable housing on every level. Because I know there's loopholes, and people they take the tax hit, or they buy a 2 or 3 bedroom across the street house, and they say that's their affordable housing, and that's not a real solution for the long term. That's not actually creating affordable housing in the way that we need it as a community.
A few years ago, the city council voted to have a meals tax, a city meals tax. Now, I know the mayor has never seen a tax he doesn't like. How about you?
Have
Would
I
you-
ever seen a tax I haven't liked?
Well, no, I mean, in terms of, would you vote for another tax for the city? Because the state legislature is now talking about other ways to get taxes out of the city, and I guess I'm just wondering, when does it end? But do you have a justification for another tax?
I think that everything needs to be, no, I'm not looking for new taxes. We'll start with that. I think anything for the future needs to be looked at on an absolute case-by-case basis. And I think the big issue and what I'm hearing from voters is that they're not as much upset about paying taxes, because that's part of society and the world we live in, but it's how they're used. And so I think that there are a lot of people that I've spoken with that if they knew that their taxes were going directly to education, that is, if you want to talk about something that 99% of people agree on, it's that people should invest in education. And so if people knew that a new tax was going directly to actually have free full-day kindergarten, there's a lot of support for that, whether they're an older person or a young family, because education is the backbone of a community and what we do for our students. So I can't really say, without having concrete something to vote on in front of me about what it is, I can't really speak to that. But the other part of the equation is that I plan, regardless of my personal beliefs, to, before I vote on something, absolutely want to hear from my constituents. And that's part of why I'm running, in terms of wanting to increase communication and hearing them and actually hearing what they want and then voting in their best interest.
Well, you raised the question of full-day kindergarten, and we've heard it before that this is getting to be a hot button around town. But the city council technically doesn't have anything to do with education. That's supposed to be left to the school committee. How do you plan on interacting with the Ward 5 school committee person or the school committee as a whole to get your ideas across and get something going?
So the person running for Ward 5 School Committee is actually Karen Robinson. She's wonderful. She lives on Chipman Road, and she is a teacher in Danvers, and I've spoken with her at length. And I've also spoken with our current Ward 5 City Councilor, Paul Goodwin. And I have the support of a lot of the people on the school committee already, because I know that I'm running for city council because the money starts up here. The school committee is given a certain amount of money to allocate. And I have my MBA. I have no background in education. So I want to be in the place where we're making sure we're funding our school committee, and I want to work with the mayor and the school committee to make sure that they're funded in the way that they need to be. So that's why I don't necessarily plan on making the decisions for them, but I know that constituents and the school committee and at least myself as a city councilor agrees that we should be investing in this. So with the right amount of people working to make sure that that's funded, I think that we can get it done.
Where would you look to cut expenses in order to pay for that?
I don't know if that, I mean, I'm not sure I would look to cut expenses. We have all this new tax revenue coming in. I think that there might be, instead of cutting expenses, I think there might be new ways to generate revenue. And I would like to look into those instead of, I work in nonprofit, and there's two ways of going about something. There's eating less or finding a way to cook more. And I always like to think outside the box and finding a way to cook more, and that doesn't necessarily mean taxes. I think we should look at things like, one of my other ideas is that I know that we just signed on with Blue Wave Solar for a solar panel field lease on the capped landfill behind Cycles 128. And that's a step in the right direction, but I actually don't think we went far enough, because now we're in a 20-year lease. And we will get some credit, and it will be a tax benefit for Beverly to some extent, but I want all of it. I want Beverly to invest in that so we can control our own energy and we can reap all of the benefits. So looking at things and sell things back to the grid, we could actually make money on some of these new endeavors if we looked at creative ways of making more work for ourselves. And that's what I want to do. I want to make more work for
Until
myself.
the city becomes a tax-paying entity, it doesn't work because the way these companies make money is they're making money on the rebates they get for putting it in.
I know.
So that's why we keep going into these purchase power deals. And on that friendly note, we've been at this for about a half an hour, and we got about 3 minutes left.
Time
So
flies.
it's your turn to look into the camera and
Okay.
tell them, hey, why should you vote for me?
All right. Well, my name is Kathleen Feldman, and I'm running for City Council for Ward 5. And I am running because I have a ton of energy and new practical ideas to build an even better Beverly. And I want to combine my professional experience and my experience as a mother of 2 young children in the Beverly Public Schools, and all of my volunteer experience around the city. I'm the PTO treasurer. I volunteer with Family Promise. And I really know our community, and I want to make it have a brighter future. And I think that if we as a community can really look at investing in building up the infrastructure and thinking of new solutions to the problems that we have, we can really do that. So I'm hoping that you vote for me on November 5th, and I look forward to serving Beverly and working hard.
Okay, but Don Martin will kill me for asking this question, but
Yes.
since I have a
Okay.
couple of minutes, or almost a couple of minutes, what do you think of term limits, and should it be added to our charter?
Well,
But quickly.
I'm running against an almost 30-year incumbent. He first took office in '89. So I actually don't. He's run unopposed for the last over a decade. So I think people in Ward 5 are very excited to have a choice finally. So I don't want to be running unopposed right now for this seat. But I think a healthy democracy has changed. You have to bring in fresh energy and really change it up to be a healthy democracy. So that's something I would consider looking into.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming and being on the show. It should be an interesting election, like you say.
Yeah.
It's been a while since Dawn has had some competition.
It's been really great so far. It's been very positive, and I'm looking forward to getting out a new generation of voters that haven't been engaged to this point and giving them a reason to get out there.
Well, thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful. And the most important thing, get out to vote the first Tuesday in November. Very important. Thank you and good night.